My daughter said, "You'll eat after everyone else." And something cracked inside me. No anger, no shouting, just a slow, clean break, like frost splitting old wood. I looked at the roast I had spent 5 hours marinating and another 3 roasting. I looked at the table where everyone else sat. Then I picked up the tray, still hot, and I walked out the front door. No one followed me. I didn't even hear a gasp, just the dull scrape of forks against porcelain and a few children laughing, unaware of the moment that had just passed. The air outside was crisp, colder than I expected. It helped. The tray was heavy, the foil thin against my fingers, but I didn't stop. I walked the 3 blocks to my house with the roast in my arms, careful not to spill the juices that still bubbled at the bottom of the pan. Inside, everything smelled like lemon soap and dust. My house hadn't been truly mine since Julia convinced me to move in with her last year. "It'll be easier," she said. "You won't have to worry about bills. We'll take care of you." I should have known better. Nothing is free in this world, not even your own dignity. I placed the roast on my kitchen counter. The silence wrapped around me like an old coat. No voices, no screens, no one asking where the cinnamon was or why the potatoes were lumpy. Just me and the ticking of the clock I hadn't wound in weeks. I made myself a plate, one of the old ones with blue flowers around the rim, chipped slightly at the edge. I served a thick slice of roast, spooned some pan drippings over it, and sat down at my own table. I ate slowly. The meat was tender. The seasoning had taken perfectly. It might have been the best I'd ever made. No one complimented it. No one interrupted me. And for the first time in years, I tasted every bite. When I was done, I washed the dish, dried it, and put it away. Then I sat in the chair by the window and watched the maple trees swaying in the wind. I used to rake those leaves every fall. Now, Julia said it was too dangerous. Said I might fall and break a hip. But she never asked if I wanted to. She only told. She's always told. I thought of Julia's voice, sharp as vinegar, saying, "You'll eat after everyone else," as if I were some servant, as if decades of being her mother, feeding her, washing her, helping with her kids, meant nothing. She'd always had a way of speaking that sounded like she was giving advice, even when she was issuing orders. The truth is, I knew this day was coming. It just took this one sentence to make me see it clearly. I sat by that window for a long time. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet, all the times I'd told myself, it's not worth the fight. When she snapped at me in front of her husband. When she rolled her eyes because I didn't understand her fancy new dishwasher. When she said, "Don't wear that to the party, it's old-fashioned." When she told me I should start planning for the end like I was a piece of spoiled fruit. I thought about my other daughter, Grace, gone 10 years now. She was the gentle one. The one who brought me tea when my arthritis flared. The one who called every week just to talk, even when she was tired. She'd left me a granddaughter, though. Rachel. Sweet, observant Rachel. She'd be old enough now to see through the family's masks. I wondered what she would think if she'd seen me leave. And then I thought about myself, about the girl I once was, and the woman I had become. I wasn't bitter, just tired. Tired of living in someone else's house. Tired of being spoken to like an obligation. Tired of pretending that being needed was the same as being loved. I stood up, went to the pantry, and pulled out a pen and notepad. There were things I needed to do. Not just today, but soon. My name was still on the deed to this house. My savings were still in my own account. I still had power. I had just forgotten it. Outside, the sun dipped low and the streetlights began to flicker on. Somewhere, Julia was probably realizing the roast was gone. Maybe someone was finally asking where I was. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Tonight, I would sleep in my own bed, eat my own food, and answer to no one. And tomorrow, I would start making decisions, not as someone's burden, but as myself. The phone rang twice that night, but I didn't answer. I watched the name flash on the screen, Julia, and let it fade back into darkness. She didn't leave a message, just rang, as if the sound alone might drag me back. It didn't. I slept better than I had in weeks, the kind of sleep that comes not from peace, but from exhaustion finally lifted. I woke up with the first light, as I always did. Though there was no child to dress, no school run, no breakfast to lay out for people who barely looked up from their phones. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a slice of the cold roast, now even more flavorful after resting overnight. I didn't heat it. I didn't fuss. I just ate it as it was, quietly, slowly, while the house held its breath around me. By 8, I'd made a list. Check the bank accounts. Call the lawyer. Go through the documents Julia helped organize last spring. Make decisions. The list wasn't long, but it was real. And it was mine. I pulled the folder from the bookshelf, the one I'd marked House and Finances, and opened it on the kitchen table. Inside, receipts from renovations I'd paid for. Utility bills, always in Julia's name. Notes from her suggesting we streamline things, meaning shift control slowly but surely out of my hands. I remembered the day she convinced me to add her to one of my checking accounts, just for emergencies. I'd thought I was being practical. That's how they get you, isn't it? They don't take everything all at once. They chip away, until you don't even recognize what used to be yours. The next thing I did was open my email. The bank's website had been bookmarked long ago, though I rarely logged in. I left that to Julia too often. But not today. I reset the password, passed the security questions, thankfully still ones I had chosen, and there it was. My balance, still intact, still mine. I made a note to visit the branch in person. I wanted eyes to look into, not just screens. I wanted records printed, authorization forms reviewed. No more joint accounts, no more access for convenience. Just me, my name, my signature. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I looked up from my notes and saw the photo on the fridge, one of the few I hadn't packed away when I moved. Grace and I, standing in the garden with Rachel between us, no more than 7 or 8, her hands full of basil she'd yanked straight from the planter. We were laughing, all 3 of us. Not performing, not posing, just real. That laugh. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. I picked up the phone and dialed Rachel's number from memory. It rang twice before she answered. "Grandma?" Her voice hit me like warm light. "Hi, sweetheart." A pause. Then, "Are you okay?" Mom said, well, she didn't say much, but she looked furious. I figured something happened. I smiled. Something did happen. I remembered I'm still alive. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then let out a short laugh. "Well, that's one way to put it. I left," I said simply. "Last night. I took the roast and I left." There was another pause, but no judgment. Just a slow exhale. "Good," she said. "Good for you." I felt my throat tighten. "Would you like to come by sometime?" I asked. "I'll make lunch. Nothing fancy." "Tomorrow?" she said quickly. I mean, if that's okay. Tomorrow would be lovely. After we hung up, I walked through the house slowly. I hadn't really looked at it in a long time. The curtains I'd sewn myself before Julia was born. The chipped ceramic lamp I refused to replace. The bookshelf full of old paperbacks no one ever borrowed. Everything had a place. Everything held weight. I dusted. I polished. I opened windows. The house exhaled with me. At noon, I went to the backyard and stood by the raised beds. The soil was dry, but not hopeless. The parsley was still holding on. A few stubborn marigolds bowed their yellow heads. I touched the wooden edge of the bed and let my fingers rest there. Julia had told me not to bother with the garden anymore. "It's too much for you, Mom. Just let it go." She didn't understand. You don't let go of the things that remind you who you are. You water them. Even if your hands shake. Even if your knees complain. Even if no one else notices. The phone didn't ring again that day, and that was fine. Grace used to say that I was the strongest woman she knew. She'd say it when I fixed the washing machine myself, or when I held my husband's hand as he took his last breath, or when I went to work 3 days after his funeral because someone had to keep the lights on. Funny how that strength becomes invisible the older you get. You stop being the woman who carried the family on her back and become the woman people talk over. The one they pat on the hand. The one they tell to rest, to sit down, to stay out of the way. After Walter died, I didn't crumble. I cooked, cleaned, paid the mortgage, worked late shifts. Julia was 21, freshly graduated and itching to move out. Grace, still in high school, stayed close. She always had one foot in the real world, never too swept up in ambition to forget who raised her. Julia had drive, no doubt, but Grace had heart. I remember the first month after his death, how Julia kept saying, "You need to let someone help you," when what she meant was, "You're not doing this the way I think you should." She moved out a month later, said the house felt too heavy, said she needed air. Grace stayed. She helped with the bills when she could, worked part-time after school, made me laugh when the nights got too quiet. I used to catch her sitting on the porch, talking to the stars like they were old friends. She was never in a rush to leave. Even when she got married, even when she had Rachel, she made time. That kind of love doesn't shout. It shows up. And when the cancer came, she faced it the same way she faced everything. Gently, but with her eyes open. She called me before every chemo appointment, not because she needed advice, but because she knew I needed to hear her voice. When she died, Julia told me, "You have to be strong now for Rachel." But her voice held no softness. It felt more like an assignment than a comfort. Rachel was just 12. She moved in with Julia because I was too old to raise a teenager. I wanted to fight it, to say I could still be a mother, even if my knees ached and my hands trembled some mornings. But I didn't. I let it happen. And maybe that was the first real surrender, not to age, but to doubt. The following years passed in a blur of compromises. I sold my car. "You don't need it anymore, Mom," Julia said. "We'll take you anywhere you need to go." Except they never did. I stopped hosting dinners. "It's easier at our place," she insisted. I stopped gardening. "Your back can't handle that." I stopped decorating for holidays. "Let us do it. You just rest." Each time I let go of something, I told myself it was just practical. But practicality has a sharp edge. You only realize how deep it cuts when you try to reach for something and find it's no longer yours. Julia isn't cruel, not in the ways people expect cruelty to look. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't hit. Her tools are silence, suggestion, dismissal. She's a master at minimizing. If I said something hurt me, she'd blink slowly and say, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way." As if my hurt was inconvenient. As if my feelings were a translation error. That's what made last night different. "You'll eat after everyone else," she said. Not with malice, with efficiency. With coldness so practiced it passed for logic. I wasn't part of the celebration. I was part of the staff. And when I stood up, took the roast, and left, she didn't stop me. Not even a murmur. Just silence. Which told me everything. This morning, after my tea, I opened another box I hadn't looked into in years. Inside were Grace's letters. Real letters. Handwritten, sealed, stamped. She believed in paper. "Screens lie," she used to say. "Ink tells the truth." I read 3 of them. One was about Rachel's first piano recital, how nervous she'd been, how her hands shook before the first note, and how she smiled afterward like she'd climbed a mountain. Another was just a list of things Grace was grateful for that week. The third was harder. It was written after a scan, the one that showed the cancer had spread. "I'm not afraid of dying," she wrote. "I'm afraid of being forgotten." I folded the letter and held it close. "I haven't forgotten you, baby," I whispered. "I never will." I spent the afternoon writing a new letter, this one to Rachel. Not an apology, not a complaint, just a story. A slice of memory from when she was small and I taught her how to make a pie crust. Her tiny hands covered in flour, her face stern with concentration. I ended it with, "You were always paying attention. I see that now. I just want you to know. So was I." I sealed the envelope, wrote her name, and placed it by the door. Tomorrow, I'd give it to her in person. There's a kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from absence. That was the kind filling Julia's house the morning after I left. I imagined it while I boiled water for tea, how the children whispered over cereal, unsure why Grandma's chair was empty. How Julia's husband glanced at her, waiting for an explanation, and how she, with all her talent for deflection, probably said nothing at all. Silence is easier than admitting your mother walked out on you in front of your guests with the main course under her arm. I sat on my porch with my tea, wrapped in an old cardigan Grace had given me the Christmas before Rachel was born. The elbows were thinned, one pocket coming loose at the seam, but it still smelled faintly of her favorite vanilla lotion. I watched a squirrel dart across the fence, then freeze, mid-motion, sensing I was watching. I smiled. I liked the company. Around 10, I heard Rachel's voice before I saw her. "Grandma?" I stood up too quickly and felt the familiar pinch in my right knee. "Back here, sweetheart." She came around the side of the house holding a brown paper bag, hair tied up, cheeks flushed. "I brought pastries," she said. "From that little place near the bookstore, the one you used to love." I nearly laughed. "Used to? I still do. Come in." We sat at the kitchen table with warm cinnamon twists between us. Rachel poured the tea like she'd seen me do it 100 times. She probably had. She didn't ask questions at first, and I didn't rush to explain. We just ate. Slowly, like we had time. "I saw Mom's face last night," she said finally. "When she came back to the table, she looked hollow, like she didn't expect you to actually go." I sipped my tea. "Neither did I, until I did." "I'm glad you did." She looked down. I wanted to say something, but it didn't feel like my place. "It wasn't," I said. "And yet, here you are." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "She's not a bad person," Rachel said quietly. "But she treats you like a favor she's doing for the universe. like she expects applause for letting you exist in her house. I didn't say anything. I know that sounds harsh, she added. No, I said. It sounds accurate. We sat in that quiet agreement for a while. Then she pulled something out of her bag, a set of house keys. I made copies, she said. For emergencies, sure, but also so I can come over whenever. You know, if you want. I took the keys, weighed them in my palm. 3 of them, one with a pink cover. Do I get a say in the keychain? I teased. Rachel grinned. That's non-negotiable. We talked a while longer about school, about her job at the library, about the neighbor's cat that kept getting into her apartment through the fire escape. She said its name was Clementine, and it had opinions about everything. When she left, I stood on the porch until her car turned the corner. Then I went back inside, sat at the table, and held the keys a little longer before placing them in the drawer, where I kept the flashlight, extra batteries, and my old recipe cards. I thought I'd feel more alone, but I didn't. I felt contained, like I had stepped back into a shape that had always been mine. The rest of the day passed in small, deliberate motions. I gathered laundry, sorted it by hand, washed the dishes, even though there were only a few, checked the mail, even though I hadn't been expecting anything. And then, late in the afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I opened the sewing box. The lid creaked. Inside, buttons, threads, fabric scraps, old pins dulled with time. I pulled out a piece of soft blue cotton I'd bought on impulse 2 years ago, planning to make Rachel a summer dress I never started. My fingers moved slower now, but the muscle memory returned. I didn't need to finish anything, just begin. Just remind my hands they still knew how to create, not just maintain. Outside, the sky turned that gentle, bruised purple it gets just before night. And still, the phone didn't ring. It was Rachel who first asked, "Do you think Mom even knows who you are anymore?" We were sitting in the living room, a pot of tea between us, sunlight slanting in through the lace curtains. She hadn't meant it as an attack, just a question, a genuine one. But it landed like a stone. I stirred my tea, not because it needed it, but because my hands needed something to do. "I think she knows the version of me she decided to keep," I said. Rachel tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "It means," I began slowly, "she remembers the woman who packed her lunches and signed her field trip slips, the one who kept her clothes clean and her bed made. She remembers me through usefulness, through chores, through routine, but not through joy. Not through the things I loved before I became mom full-time." Rachel leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. "So what did you love?" The question was simple, but I hadn't answered it in years. "I loved dancing," I said after a pause. "Ballroom, mostly. I was on a college team for a year before I met your grandfather, and I loved old jazz records and lemon cookies. And swimming at the quarry on the hottest days of July?" I stopped, surprised at the sudden tightness in my chest. "And I loved Sunday mornings when the house was quiet, and I'd sit by the window with a book, and nobody needed anything from me." Rachel smiled softly. "I never knew that." "Of course you didn't. Nobody ever asked." She looked like she was about to speak, but then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, winced, and turned it face down without answering. "Your mother?" She nodded. "She's been intense. Keeps asking where I am, if I've checked in with you, like she suddenly cares again. She doesn't like when things move without her. Control freak." "She doesn't think she is," I said. "That's the problem. She thinks she's saving people. She thinks she's protecting the family from embarrassment, from disorder, from, God forbid, discomfort." Rachel raised an eyebrow. By telling her own mother to wait until everyone else had eaten? I shrugged. That's the kind of comfort she believes in. Hierarchy. Performance. She wants her life to look clean on the outside, no matter what mold grows underneath. Rachel shook her head. I don't want to turn into that. You won't, I said, reaching for her hand. You ask questions. You show up. She squeezed my fingers gently. That afternoon, we went for a walk. Just around the neighborhood. The air smelled like damp leaves and chimney smoke. Rachel carried a paper bag of cookies she'd picked up on the way, and we shared them as we walked. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Everything you gave up? I thought for a while. The sidewalk cracked beneath our feet. A crow called from a wire overhead. I regret thinking it would be repaid. Rachel didn't answer right away. Then she said, That's fair. When she dropped me off later, she hugged me tighter than usual. I watched her car disappear down the road, then went back inside and locked the door. Not from fear, but from choice. I liked knowing who I was letting in. That night, I sat by the radio and found a station that still played jazz. Coltrane, specifically. I closed my eyes and remembered the smell of waxed floors, the weight of someone's hand on my waist, the thrill of turning in step with a rhythm larger than both of us. I didn't dance, not really, just swayed in place. But it was enough. The next morning, Julia came to the house. I saw her through the window, standing stiff on the porch, holding something in her arms. I didn't move. I let her knock twice. Then I opened the door. Hi, Mom, she said. Her voice was too bright, too brittle. I nodded. Julia. She held out a foil-covered dish. I brought your Tupperware back and some turkey from, well, what was left. I looked at it and didn't reach for it. I have food, I said. Her smile faltered. I just thought, why are you really here? She bristled. Is it so strange for me to visit? Yes, I said plainly. She looked past me into the house. Rachel's been avoiding me. She's been here. A pause. Julia took a breath. Mom, I know things have been tense, but you have to understand. There were guests, expectations. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. You just didn't care if you were. That's not fair. No, I said. It's not. But it's true. We stood there for a few seconds, the air between us thick with things that had never been said. She held out the dish again. I didn't move. I made a roast, I said quietly. Julia blinked. What? I made a roast the night I left. I sat in my own kitchen, at my own table, and I ate it while it was still warm. She looked confused, like she couldn't decide if I was angry or proud. Mom, I don't need your leftovers, I said gently. Then I closed the door. I didn't lock the door after Julia left. I didn't need to. Some boundaries are stronger than deadbolts. I stood in the hallway a moment, holding on to the quiet. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. The old fear, the one that says, you're being ungrateful, or she meant well, was gone. It had withered sometime between the front door and the first bite of that roast I ate alone. And like anything dead, it no longer held power. Later, I wrapped the dish she brought in a kitchen towel and walked it down the street to the church donation freezer. They take food quietly there. No questions, no paperwork. Just a kind soul making sure nothing goes to waste. I placed the turkey inside, left the Tupperware, and walked home without looking back. By the time I returned, the kettle was still warm. That's when I knew what I had to do next. For years, I'd let Julia handle things. Bills, online accounts, renewals. It started small. a reminder to pay the electricity, a suggestion to link our phone plans. Then came the bank accounts. She convinced me to make her an authorized user on one in case something happens. Then another. Then the automatic payments began, school fees for the kids, a portion of the groceries, even a monthly household help contribution that I never actually saw itemized. I didn't argue. I told myself I was being helpful, that families support each other, that she'd done so much for me by letting me live with them. Now all I could think was how cleverly she'd built the cage, not out of cruelty, no, just entitlement. Quiet, subtle, and constant. I opened the drawer where I'd kept my records before moving in with Julia. My name was still on all the accounts. The bank had changed their logo since I'd last handled things, but the core was the same. I called the branch directly. "Yes, Mrs. Hensley," the young man said after confirming my identity. "You're still the primary holder on the savings and the joint checking. How can I help?" "I'd like to make some changes," I said, "but I'd rather do them in person." "Of course. Do you need any accommodations? We have assisted services if—" "I can walk, thank you." He hesitated. "We're open until 5. I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and changed into slacks and a navy sweater, something sturdy, something mine. I pinned my silver beret into place, the one Grace always said made me look sharp and settled. Then I picked up my worn leather bag, slipped my notepad inside, and walked to the corner to catch the bus. It felt good to wait at the stop. Normal. Grounded. Nobody chauffeuring me around like luggage. Nobody calling to ask where I was going. Just me, out in the world, doing something for myself. At the bank, the same young man who'd answered the phone greeted me at the counter. His name tag read, Kevin. He smiled politely, but looked slightly uneasy, like I might start crying or complaining at any moment. That's what they expect from women my age. Tears or confusion. I gave him neither. "I'd like to remove an authorized user from 2 accounts," I said, laying my ID flat on the counter. He blinked. "Yes, of course. If you'll step into one of our offices, I'll get the forms." 10 minutes later, I sat at a polished desk, signing papers with steady hands. "Would you also like to revoke online access permissions?" he asked. "Yes." "And automatic transfers?" "All of them." He paused, eyes flicking to the screen. "There's a recurring transfer of $450 every month to a school tuition account." "I know," I said. "Cancel it." Another pause. "There are also smaller ones. Subscriptions, home services, some rideshare activity. Do you recognize these?" "No." "Cancel everything." He nodded and began typing. "You'll receive confirmation emails later today." I handed him a new email address I'd made that morning. "Send them here." His fingers hesitated again. "Mrs. Hensley, if I may, this is a significant change. Would you like us to flag the account in case someone tries to reestablish access without your consent?" I looked at him squarely. "Yes, flag it." When it was done, he stood and walked me to the door. "Anything else I can do for you today?" I smiled. "You've already done more than you know." Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my sweater close, but I wasn't cold. Not really. My body was humming. Not from adrenaline, but from certainty. For the first time in a long time, I knew exactly whose name was on what, and that was only the beginning. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon polish and old paper. I'd been there once before, years ago, when Walter and I drew up our wills after his first heart scare. The building was the same, narrow hallways, scuffed molding, but the receptionist was new, and the chairs in the waiting area were now faux leather instead of velvet. The kind of change no one talks about, but you feel all the same. "Mrs. Hensley," the receptionist smiled. "You're here to see Mr. Abrams?" I nodded. "He's expecting me." She led me down a short corridor and into a small office with tall windows. The man behind the desk stood when I entered. Grayer than I remembered, but his handshake was still strong. "Evelyn," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "It's been a while." "Yes, too long." He sat and folded his hands. "What brings you in?" I didn't hesitate. "I'd like to revise my will, and I want to set up a trust for my granddaughter." He blinked once. "All right." There was no judgment in his voice, just calm professionalism, which was exactly what I needed. "You remember Grace?" "Of course. She's gone now." "Been gone a while. I'm sorry." I nodded once. "She left a daughter, Rachel. I want to ensure that whatever I have left goes to her, not to my other daughter." He didn't flinch. "We can do that. I also want to protect those assets while I'm still alive," I added. "Rachel's young, but I trust her more than anyone else. I don't want Julia, or anyone else, having access to anything in my name." Mr. Abrams opened a legal pad and began taking notes. "We can create a living trust. You'll retain control as trustee, but designate Rachel as the beneficiary. That way, when the time comes, she'll inherit without going through probate." "Good. I'd also recommend revoking any financial power of attorney that currently names Julia." "Already done," I said. "The bank's been notified. Her access is gone." He glanced up, lips twitching into something between a smile and a nod of approval. "I want the trust to include the house," I continued. "All the accounts I still hold, any investments, everything." "That's doable. We'll draw up a schedule of assets and transfer ownership into the trust entity. You'll still live in the home, use the funds, but legally, the trust owns it." "Perfect." He looked at me for a moment. Pen paused above the paper. "May I ask what prompted this change, Evelyn?" I took a breath. "She told me to eat after everyone else." His brow furrowed, then smoothed again. He didn't need the details. The sentence was enough. "I see. She's been managing things for years. Not badly, but not kindly either. I let it happen. I thought I was being helpful. But lately, I've started remembering that I'm still a person, not a duty, not a wallet with a cardigan." He made a few more notes. "I don't want this to be a punishment," I added. "I just want to be clear about where I stand. I want Rachel to have what I built, not what someone else siphoned off." "She'll have it." The appointment took another hour. By the time we finished reviewing forms and outlining contingencies, I felt steadier than I had in months. As he slid the draft papers into a folder, Mr. Abrams looked at me with quiet respect. "Most people wait too long," he said, "until they've already been drained." I waited long enough. He stood to walk me out. "When everything's finalized, I'll call you," he said. "But you'll need to come in again for signatures." "I'll be here." Outside, the sky had turned slate gray, and the air smelled like rain. I didn't rush. I walked past the pharmacy, past the bakery, past the tiny park with the rusted swing set. I sat on a bench under the trees and just breathed for a while. There's something strange about reclaiming control after giving it away for so long. It doesn't feel triumphant. It feels quiet, like adjusting your posture after years of leaning the wrong way. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Everything okay, Grandma?" I typed back, "It's starting to be." Then I slid the phone into my pocket and listened to the wind in the leaves. The papers were ready within a week. I returned to Mr. Abrams' office on a Thursday morning. The sky was clear for once, sunlight pooling like gold on the sidewalks, but the wind still had bite. I wore my wool coat, the one Grace bought me the year she got her promotion. She said it made me look like someone who doesn't ask for permission. I folded it neatly over the back of the chair in Mr. Abrams' office as he laid out the documents across the desk. "There's the will revision," he began, tapping each page gently. "Here's the trust agreement. Rachel is named as sole beneficiary. You're the trustee. The house, accounts, and investment funds are listed in the Schedule A attachment. And here," he paused, "is the formal revocation of financial power of attorney." I looked at the thick envelope marked Julia Hensley. It was already addressed and stamped. "She'll receive a copy," he confirmed, "along with the cease letter. She'll have no legal standing to act on your behalf moving forward." I took the pen. My hands didn't shake. I signed every page, slowly, deliberately, watching the ink curve behind me like a trail I could finally see forming in real time. When we finished, Mr. Abrams gathered everything and slipped the signed documents into a large binder. "That's it," he said. "You're no longer operating under assumption or habit. Everything's legally yours again." I nodded. "Good. There is one more thing," he said, opening a small drawer. "Do you want to include a medical directive? Someone to speak for you if you can't?" I didn't hesitate. "Rachel, she's under 30, he warned gently. "That's fine by law, but emotionally, she's the only one who still asks what I want." He nodded and slid the form across the table. We finished in under 20 minutes. When I stood to leave, Mr. Abrams offered me the binder. "Keep this somewhere safe, and let Rachel know where it is." "I will." "And Evelyn?" I turned. "You're not just reclaiming things, you're protecting them. There's a difference." I nodded. "That's exactly what I'm doing." I took the long way home. I passed Julia's neighborhood and didn't turn in. I passed the school where Rachel once played violin in the third-grade concert. I passed the hardware store where Walter used to buy nails he didn't need just to talk to the owner. When I reached my house, I felt it in a new way. Not as a burden, not as a museum, but as shelter. A stronghold. Mine. I placed the binder in the drawer with the emergency flashlight and the spare checkbook. Then I sat at the kitchen table and wrote Rachel a letter. Not dramatic, not emotional, just instructions. Where the binder was, who to call, what to do if and when. When I finished, I tucked the letter into an envelope and wrote her name in block letters across the front. Then I placed it under the old cookie jar, the one she always lifts when she visits, as if I might have left something sweet inside. I stood by the window for a while, sipping tea, watching the late autumn light shift across the yard. The phone rang once, then again. I let it go. 5 minutes later, a text came through. "Julia, we need to talk, it's important." I deleted it without reading further. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I pulled out my planner and started making lists. Not lists of chores, lists of things I wanted. A new pair of walking shoes, a small raised garden bed for spring, a trip, just a weekend, somewhere with water. Not big things, not fancy things, just mine. That night, for the first time in years, I locked the door from the inside, not out of fear, but as a quiet declaration. I was home. Julia didn't knock this time. She rang the bell once, then again, sharper, longer. I waited, finishing my tea. When I opened the door, she stood stiffly on the porch, arms crossed, face tight. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't move. About? Her eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb, Mother. You've revoked everything. I got the letter from the lawyer, the trust, the will. You cut me out entirely. I stepped back and opened the door wider. Then you already have the answer. She brushed past me into the living room, uninvited. She always walked like the house owed her its walls. Why now? She asked, spinning to face me. Why after all this time? You live under my roof for over a year, and suddenly I'm the villain? I sat in my chair by the window, calm. I don't live under your roof anymore. You stayed here for free, she snapped. We took care of you. No, I said. I cooked. I cleaned. I picked up your children from school. I paid for half your bills. That wasn't care. That was arrangement. And I don't do arrangements that erase me. Julia blinked. For a second, her mouth moved but made no sound. She hadn't expected clarity. She'd come prepared for guilt. You're being dramatic, she said finally. No, I'm being exact. She started pacing. You're going to leave everything to Rachel? She's 22. She doesn't know anything about finances. She'll learn. I should have been part of that conversation. I should have. You had years, I interrupted. Years to treat me like a person, not a burden. You didn't. Julia stopped pacing. I didn't mean to hurt you. You just didn't care if you did. She flinched, but I held her gaze. All these years, I said quietly, you thought I wouldn't notice. You told me when to speak, when to sit, when to eat. You dressed it up as concern, but it was always control. She crossed her arms again, defensive now. I was trying to keep things manageable. For who? Her silence told me everything. After a while, she sat down across from me, her voice softening. You could have said something sooner. I did. You didn't hear it. Or maybe you did, and ignored it. Her jaw tightened again. You made me out to be some cold monster. I didn't make you anything. I just stopped lying about how it felt. She exhaled hard and rubbed her forehead. So that's it? You're just done with me? I looked at her, my daughter, a woman I had fed and clothed and protected, and I felt no hatred, just exhaustion. No, I said gently. I'm not done with you, but I'm done living under your conditions. She didn't speak after that. We sat in silence for a long time, the afternoon sun painting sharp lines across the floor. Finally, she stood. Do you want me to go? I nodded. I do. Julia looked like she might say more, but then she turned, walked to the door, and let herself out. The door shut quietly behind her. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt space. The kind that used to belong to me. The kind I'd forgotten how to breathe in. Later that evening, Rachel called. How are you? She asked. Better, I said. Clearer. She paused. She came by, didn't she? Yes. Did it help? I thought for a moment. It helped me remember that boundaries aren't cruel. They're necessary. Rachel didn't say anything, but I could hear the warmth in her breath. Good, she whispered. That's good. We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. Sometimes it's not about what you say. It's about finally being heard. The next few days came with noise. Not the kind you hear, but the kind that fills your phone. Missed calls. Voicemails with polite urgency. Texts that started with, Mom, I think we should talk, and ended with, This has gone too far. Some from Julia, a few from her husband, Alan, who never used to speak to me directly unless the car insurance lapsed or a casserole needed returning. The messages blurred together after a while. Apologies wrapped in expectation. Worry disguised as control. And underneath them all, a single thread. They were losing access, and they didn't know how to function without it. I didn't answer. It wasn't revenge. It was space. I left my phone on the kitchen counter and spent mornings on the porch with a blanket and a book. I'd reread the same paragraph 4 times, not because I couldn't focus, but because I liked the rhythm of the words. I'd forgotten how books felt in the hand, how they changed the texture of time. Around noon each day, I'd walk, not far, just through the neighborhood, past the hardware store, past the post office where Mr. Duncan still flirted shamelessly despite being 92 and nearly deaf. Sometimes I'd pick up lemons or fresh bread. Sometimes I'd buy nothing at all, just to remember what it felt like to move freely through a place without purpose. The house stayed warm. I baked for myself, small batches. 2 muffins, not 12. 1 pot of soup, not a vat. I ate at the table, not in front of a screen, not standing near the sink, and always from a real plate. That mattered to me. On the 3rd evening, the doorbell rang. Not Julia, not Alan. It was Toby, Rachel's younger cousin, Julia's son. 16. All long limbs and nervous energy. He held a paper bag and wouldn't look me in the eye. "Mom made me bring this," he said, thrusting the bag forward. "It's, some food, I think, and a card." I took it, more for him than for myself. "You want to come in?" He hesitated, then nodded. Inside, he stood awkwardly in the hallway while I set the bag on the counter and peeked inside. Chicken in plastic containers, a slice of pie. The card was unsigned. Toby cleared his throat. "I think she's scared." "Of what?" "Of not being forgiven." I nodded. "And you?" He shrugged. "I'm just confused. You were always there. Now you're not. That's what happens when people stop seeing you." He looked down at his sneakers. "Rachel says you're not mad, that you're tired." "I am." He nodded again. "I liked it when you lived with us," he said. "Even if Mom always made it seem like you were in the way." I smiled. "Thank you." He looked around the house, taking in the photos, the quiet. "It's different here. It smells like real." That made me laugh. "That's probably the onions." He grinned. Before he left, he paused by the door. "Are we still family?" I looked at him, so young, still growing into his voice. "Always," I said. "But family and boundaries aren't enemies." He frowned. "What's that mean?" "It means you're allowed to say no to people you love." "Oh." He stood there for a second longer, then stepped forward and hugged me. Awkward and quick, but real. After he left, I sat at the table with the card. No signature, no note. Just a blank interior with one typed word on the front. "Sorry." It didn't feel like enough, but I wasn't waiting for it to be. That night, I didn't turn the phone off. I just turned the volume down. The sound of my own breathing was enough. Julia waited a full week before trying again. This time, it came by mail. A pale blue envelope, her handwriting on the front. She always had neat script, sharp and slanted, like she was still trying to impress a teacher. I opened it at the kitchen table, knife sliding easily through the fold. Inside, a card with gold trim, the kind people send for holidays or polite condolences. No emotion, just elegance. The message inside was short. "Let's start fresh. Come for dinner. Sunday. Just family. Just us. Love, Julia." I read it twice. Then I placed it back in the envelope and set it aside. I didn't need time to think. I already knew the answer. When Sunday came, I didn't go. I didn't call. I didn't explain. I simply made my own dinner, roasted carrots, a piece of fish, rice with lemon zest, and I ate it by the window as the sky went soft and gold. Around 7, the phone rang. Julia. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, I picked up. Her voice was clipped, too steady. You got the card? Yes. We waited for you. I know. I made the lamb, your recipe. I stirred my tea. That's nice. She exhaled sharply. Are you punishing me? No, I said. I'm declining. She didn't understand. I could hear it in the silence. It's just dinner, Mom. It's never just dinner with you. A pause. I'm trying to make things right. No, I said. You're trying to reset the board, back to how it was, back to what was comfortable for you. But I'm not playing anymore. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Rachel says you've changed. She's right. I don't know what you want from me. Nothing, I said. That's the point. Silence stretched long between us. Then, in a smaller voice, she said, I miss you. I believe you. More silence. But I won't go back, I added. I won't sit at a table where I'm asked to earn my place. I won't trade my presence for permission. Her voice hardened. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I think I finally remember I matter. She didn't respond, and I didn't fill the gap. Eventually, she said, I don't know what else to do. You don't have to do anything, I said gently. Just stop expecting me to return to who I was when I forgot myself. She ended the call. Not with anger, just with a kind of finality. A door she didn't know how to open and wasn't ready to walk through. I sat there a long time, listening to the quiet. Not lonely, not triumphant, just still. Later, I opened the drawer, took out the blue envelope and tore it in half. Then again, and once more. The scraps fluttered into the trash like dried petals. I went to bed early. No dreams. Just rest. And in the morning, I woke without dread. I signed the lease on a Tuesday. It was a small apartment, 2 rooms and a kitchen, on the 2nd floor of a quiet building near the park. Nothing grand, nothing polished. But the windows faced east, and the light poured in like honey each morning. That mattered more than granite countertops ever could. The landlord, Mr. Patel, was kind. He helped carry the boxes up the narrow stairs and showed me where the breaker panel was, just in case. When I asked about painting the kitchen cabinets, he shrugged and said, As long as you don't pick black, I trust you. I chose sage green. Rachel helped me settle in. We made a day of it. We unpacked slowly, drinking iced tea from mismatched mugs and laughing when we found things I didn't even remember owning. She hung a small framed print above the sink, a lemon tree, soft and faded. It looks like you, she said. Rooted, but still growing. I smiled. That's nicer than being called hardy. We spent the afternoon arranging the bookshelves. Grace's letters went into a wooden box that now lived on the side table, close enough to touch. By evening, Rachel had to leave. Before she did, she placed a plant, a trailing pothos, on the windowsill. Every woman needs a plant, she said. It's proof you can still nurture something. After she left, I sat on the couch and listened to the new quiet. Different from the silence in Julia's house. This one didn't press. It welcomed. It asked nothing. I made a simple dinner, sautéed spinach, a boiled egg, toast. I ate it slowly, watching the shadows climb the opposite wall. No one asked why there weren't more sides. No one criticized the softness of the yolk. The next morning, I met my neighbor. Her name was Ruth, 83, and she walked with a cane that had floral stickers all over the shaft. "You're the new one," she said, eyeing me like a shopkeeper does a fresh shipment. "I suppose I am." She nodded toward my door. "Don't put out trash before 5. They fine us. And the lady in 2B feeds the squirrels, but don't tell management. I like her too much to see her evicted." I smiled. "Thanks for the warning." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You divorced?" "No, widowed." She tilted her head. "Then what brings you here?" I didn't hesitate. I remembered I'm allowed to live on my own terms. Her lips twitched. "Well, it's about time." We stood in the hallway talking for 20 minutes. About arthritis, old movies, and which market had the best produce. She reminded me a little of myself, sharp when she needed to be, but kind underneath. A woman who'd weathered more than she let on. That afternoon, I rearranged the silverware drawer. Not because it was wrong, just because I could. I placed forks in the front, knives at the back. It made no logical sense, but it pleased me. Later, I took a walk around the block. Just once. Enough to feel the air on my skin. Enough to feel like part of the day. And when I returned, there were no expectations waiting for me. Just the warm hum of the radiator. Just the lemon tree above the sink. Just me, in my space, with no one asking what I was doing there. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was visiting my own life. The envelope was cream-colored and addressed in wide, loopy cursive. I nearly tossed it with the flyers and coupon mailers, only the return address stopped me. Helen Carter. I hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. We'd lived 2 houses apart when the girls were little. She had twin boys, both loud and fast, and always tracking mud through her kitchen. We used to sit on her back steps, drinking coffee while the kids turned the backyard into a war zone. She smoked menthols and wore her hair in a braid that hung down her back like a rope. She moved after her husband got transferred to Idaho. We promised to write. We didn't. I opened the letter at the kitchen table, already steeping tea. The paper was thick, the ink a little faded. "Evie," it began, "I saw your name in the church bulletin. They said you'd spoken at a memorial fundraiser for Grace last spring. I couldn't believe it. I'm sorry it took me so long to find the right words, but when I saw your name again, I knew I had to reach out." She remembered Grace. Remembered her laugh. Remembered her drawing pictures on the sidewalk with chalk and insisting they were inventions. She wrote about her boys, one now a teacher, the other working in forestry. She had grandkids, a dog, a new hip. She said she was slower now, but not done yet. Then, near the end, "I still remember the woman who danced barefoot in the rain on your 40th birthday, the one who said, 'If the world's already wet, you may as well move with it.' I hope you've kept dancing, and if not, well, it's never too late." I put the letter down and felt something soft and old press into my chest. Not sadness, not quite nostalgia, just recognition. I had forgotten that woman. She wasn't a fantasy or a version of myself from a dream. She was real. She lived here once, in this body, with these hands. And I'd buried her under years of, "Is dinner ready?" and "Can you pick up the kids?" and "You're just being sensitive, Mom." I stood up, crossed the kitchen, and opened the drawer where I kept old tea towels. At the very back, folded tight, was a CD Rachel had burned for me years ago. Grandma's Jazz, written in silver marker. I didn't even know if it would play anymore, but I pulled out the old stereo, dusted it off, and tried. It crackled. then caught. Nina Simone's voice filled the room, low and deep, like honey turning in the spoon. I stood by the window, arms crossed, just listening. Then I let myself sway. Just a little. The floor creaked beneath me, and my knees didn't love the movement. But I moved anyway. In my socks. With no one watching. With no performance. It wasn't dancing, not really. But maybe it was close enough. I wrote Helen back that same afternoon. I told her thank you for remembering, for seeing, for naming the version of me I had forgotten. I told her about Grace, about Rachel, about the roast I carried out the front door like an offering to my old self. I didn't mention Julia. I didn't need to. I ended the letter with a line she'd once said to me after I'd spilled coffee on a new dress and nearly cried over it. You're allowed to be messy. Just don't pretend it's someone else's mess. I'd never forgotten that, even if I forgot everything else. When I walked to the mailbox, the wind picked up. Cold and fast, but not punishing. The lemon tree print fluttered slightly when I came back inside. I touched the frame lightly. I remember you, I said quietly. And I did. Rachel came over on a Friday. No warning, no text. Just a soft knock and her face behind the frosted glass. I brought mushrooms, she said, holding up a brown paper bag. And those little onions you like. I was just about to make soup, I said. Perfect, she smiled. I'll chop. We didn't rush. The kitchen wasn't large, but we moved around each other easily. I showed her where I kept the knives, still sharp, still familiar. She peeled onions with practiced hands, eyes blinking from the sting. I forgot how strong these are, she muttered. That's how you know they're honest, I said. She laughed and wiped her eyes. I cleaned the mushrooms gently with a towel. No soaking, no shortcuts. She watched for a moment, then mimicked me. Mom always scrubs them under the faucet. Your mother never had patience for mushrooms. Rachel didn't argue. She just nodded. We worked in comfortable quiet, broken only by the bubbling of the pot. The smell filled the apartment, earthy, savory, warm. She found bowls in the cabinet without asking, set the table without fuss. When we sat down, neither of us reached for our phones. She tasted the soup and closed her eyes. God, Grandma, this is perfect. I smiled. It's just soup. No, she said. It's yours. That's the difference. We ate slowly. She dipped her bread into the broth and let it soak before each bite. When the bowls were nearly empty, she looked up. Do you think I'll end up like her? There was no bitterness in her voice, just the question. Bare, genuine. No, I said. You already asked the question she never could. Rachel toyed with her spoon. She's trying again, sending messages, telling me she wants to talk. Do you want to? She thought for a long moment, then shook her head. Not right now. I just don't trust what she wants. You don't owe her more than you have to give. She looked relieved, not because I gave her permission, but because I said it aloud. After dinner, we washed dishes together. She dried, I rinsed. I like it here, she said. It feels honest. That's the second time you've used that word tonight. Yeah, she said, smiling. I think I'm craving it. When we finished, she didn't rush to leave. She wandered into the living room, sat on the floor with her back against the couch. I joined her. I used to think you were just quiet, she said, but now I think you were just careful. I nodded. I had to be. Why? Because when you grow up in a world that doesn't ask what you think, you learn to watch first, to measure. And now? Now I'm learning to answer before I'm asked. Rachel leaned her head back, resting it against the cushions. "I want to be like that," she said. "You already are." We sat a long while without talking. Eventually, she stood, pulled on her coat, and kissed my cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for all of this." "Come back next week," I said. "We'll try a pie." "Deal." After she left, I cleaned the counter, wiped the stove, folded the dish towel over the sink. The apartment smelled like garlic and thyme, like effort and ease. I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat by the window. Outside, a street lamp flickered. The air looked like velvet, thick, quiet, soft. I didn't think of Julia. I thought of Rachel. I thought of soup and salt, and how some things, once tended properly, don't need saving. Just space and time. There's a moment, just before dawn, when the world holds its breath. The sky isn't light yet, but it isn't dark either. The shadows soften. Even the wind seems to pause. That's when I like to walk now. Just a short loop. Down to the corner, past the bakery that opens too early, then back again. The air is crisp, and the sidewalks are still damp from the night. Sometimes I see Ruth from down the hall. She walks slower these days, but she still waves. The morning I turned 79, I found a small note taped to my door. "Happy birthday, Evelyn. You remind me who I want to become." No name, but I knew it was Rachel. I didn't need flowers or fanfare. That note was enough. I made myself pancakes that morning. Just 2. With a little butter, a drizzle of syrup, and half a banana. I ate them slowly at the table, sunlight warming the floor by my feet. Later, I opened the drawer where the binder lived. I hadn't touched it in weeks, but I pulled it out, placed it on the table, and added one last letter, short, clear, folded once. It read, "Rachel, what I have is yours, not because of blood, but because of kindness. You never tried to manage me. You just met me where I stood. That's love. That's legacy. Don't let anyone teach you otherwise." I placed it behind the will and closed the binder. That afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched the light move across the street. Nothing extraordinary happened. A mail truck passed. A boy on a bicycle wobbled past, his backpack nearly tipping him over. The world, unbothered by my peace, kept going. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies, not for understanding, not for the version of motherhood I never got to grow into. I had enough. I had Rachel. I had mornings and music and the scent of soup simmering just for me. Sometimes, healing isn't a wave. It's a quiet return to yourself. And if you've been reading this, if you've ever felt small in a house you helped build, or quiet in a life you once led loud, let this be your permission. You don't need anyone's blessing to come back to yourself. You just need to begin. So begin. Now. And if this story found you, share it. Leave a comment. Pass it to another woman who needs reminding. Your worth was never up for debate.